and his increasingly odd behavior became a source of concern. One evening, Jesse sat alone in the studio, trying to distract himself from his mounting anxieties. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and he saw Neo standing in the doorway, looking pale and disturbed. Neo walked over to the easel and began to sketch furiously. Jesse approached him cautiously, peering over his shoulder at the drawing. It was an unsettling image, a young woman leaning against a tree in the forest, dressed in a flowing white gown, her face adorned with a faint, eerie smile. She held a basket, but the contents of the basket were indistinguishable. "What is this?" Jesse asked, a shiver running down his spine. Neo didn't respond but continued to work on the drawing. Jesse, feeling a sense of dread, decided to inform the teachers about Neo's presence in the studio. A week later, during a painting class, Jesse watched as Neo sat in a corner, his eyes hollow and his demeanor withdrawn. Zhang Luoxi examined Neo's latest work, an eerie and haunting piece that seemed to capture a new level of darkness. "This work is truly remarkable," Zhang Luoxi said with a tone of reverence. "The originality and depth of this piece are impressive." One of the students asked, "Why is the woman's hand dripping with blood in the painting?" Neo looked up, his eyes unblinking and cold. "She was cut up with a knife," he said calmly, as blood began to seep from his eyes. A collective gasp filled the classroom as students recoiled in shock. Zhang Luoxi's face turned pale, and he hurriedly called for an ambulance, his hands trembling. Jesse stood there, paralyzed by fear. The sight of Neo's blood-streaked eyes and the disturbing nature of his artwork left him feeling a deep, gnawing terror. That night, Jesse was again disturbed by the strange, sorrowful cries from outside. When he realized that Neo was not in the dorm, his anxiety grew, and he decided to call Zhang Luoxi. However, as he was about to dial the number, he noticed a figure climbing over the school's wall. "Neo!" Jesse shouted, but Neo did not seem to hear him. Frantically, Neo crossed over the wall and plunged into the dark, dense forest beyond. Jesse's heart raced as he chased after Neo. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and twisted branches, and the crying sounds seemed to grow louder and more insistent, guiding Jesse deeper into the darkness. "Neo, stop!" Jesse yelled, but the forest absorbed his voice, leaving only the mournful cries and the echo of his footsteps. In the heart of the forest, Jesse saw Neo running aimlessly, his figure barely visible against the oppressive darkness. Despite his desperate efforts, Jesse could not catch up to him, and Neo vanished into the blackness of the night. The next day, when Zhang Luoxi learned of Neo's second disappearance, he immediately called the police. The officers, along with the teachers, began a search in the forest. Jesse also joined the search party, his heart filled with anxiety and fear. The air in the forest was cold and damp. The shadows of the trees seemed to hide countless secrets. The officers carried flashlights, meticulously searching every corner. Finally, as dawn broke, they found Neo in a muddy pit. Neo was curled up in the mud, clutching a large piece of wood as if he was sleeping. The mud covered his clothes and face, making him look extremely disheveled. What on earth happened to this child? The police officers exchanged glances, unable to comprehend the scene before them. Neo was taken back to the school, but his condition unsettled everyone. He babbled incoherently, speaking words that made no sense, as if controlled by some dark force. He keeps saying that he must sleep in the mud puddle at night, or something terrible will happen, one of the officers explained to Zhang Luoshi. Jesse was deeply shaken by this revelation. He recalled Neo's paintings, particularly the one with the bloodied woman, and felt a chilling connection between the artwork and the murder case. Among the police officers was Officer Li, who had a particular sensitivity to supernatural events. He began to review the case files from the past 2 years related to incidents in the forest and discovered that a year ago, a young woman had been murdered there. Could this be related to Neo? Officer Li felt a chill running down his spine. Jesse was terrified by this discovery. He thought about Neo's disturbing painting, the woman covered in blood, and how it might be linked to the case. When Neo woke up, he was even more deranged, constantly muttering strange things. He insisted that he had to sleep in the mud puddle at night to avoid a great evil. Jesse listened to him with mounting dread, unsure of how to help Neo or face the potential horrors to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Neo's behavior grew even more bizarre. One night, Jesse discovered that Neo was missing from the dormitory again. He secretly followed Neo and found him digging furiously in the mud puddle with a shovel. "What are you doing?" Jesse asked cautiously. Neo didn't respond. He just continued to dig relentlessly until he unearthed a segment of a hand bone. He carefully cleaned the bone and took it back to the art studio. Jesse followed him discreetly and watched as Neo removed the hand from the anatomy skeleton used for teaching, replacing it with the bone he had dug up. The sight was horrifying, and Jesse felt a deep sense of dread. He knew that whatever Neo was doing, it was far from ordinary. A few days later, the art class continued as usual. The anatomy skeleton stood quietly in the corner of the studio, its hand now replaced with the bone Neo had brought. No one seemed to notice the change, and the skeleton was used by the students as a model for their drawings. But Jesse could not find peace. He felt an unshakable sense that the skeleton harbored a terrible secret. Every time he glanced at the replaced hand, a profound and inexpressible fear gripped him. That night, Jesse was once again disturbed by the crying sounds. He decided to uncover the truth behind the skeleton. As he approached the skeleton, he felt a sudden chill, as if countless eyes were watching him from the darkness. "What is Neo really doing?" Jesse whispered, his voice trembling. In response, there was only the eerie crying and the faint traces of blood on the skeleton's new hand.